Materials and lights are so important for your game to get that appearance and that great visual effects. Materials are what describe the appearance of surfaces, and they're controlled by a list of properties. Feel free to follow along, and I'll show you how to do this from start to finish. The first thing that we're going to do is go ahead and create a new scene. And then we'll double click that scene to open it up. By default, we're going to have this main camera and directional light. And if we go to Window, Rendering, and Lighting, we want to pull up our lighting information and go to our environment. And you'll see our skybox is going to influence and pass light inflow. So what we want to do is click that target symbol and change this to none. And then you can see in our scene view and our display, we can go to our main camera here and we'll change the camera. We'll just do the solid color and we can change that to black for now. That'll really help us to visualize, see the lighting and the texture information in our scene. We can Control S to save that. And then we're going to download the files here for the ScifiRoom textures. We'll go ahead and start with our sci-fi textures. You can drag it in or double click it and we'll get this pop up and we can go ahead and import that in. And now we can go ahead and turn on our grid so we can see where we're at. And then in our hierarchy, we'll right click, create a 3D plane. We can call this our floor 01. Let's reset our transforms. Now for the first time, we're going to go ahead and create a new material from scratch so you can kind of see how this is done. We'll right click in our project window and create a material. And we can call this floor mat, as in material. And then with that floor mat selected, you'll see our settings over here in the inspector, and the albedo is essentially what represents the color on the surface of the object. Now this is for the standard shader or the built-in render pipeline. If you're using URP, the universal, then it would be base map, but base map and albedo are the same thing. We're just going to grab and throw in, let's see, our floor, it'd just be called floor 02. Drag that into our albedo. You can see we get a preview of it on a sphere. And then now this material, we can just drag it onto our plane. So that's one way of doing it. Let's just create a new one for scratch for right now. So we'll right click, create a 3D plane, reset the transforms. So each one of these squares is 1, and 10 of those would actually be one of these squares. So the smaller squares are actually 10 meters, I believe. So a 1 by 1 by 1 is actually 10 meters. So in this case, we want to set this one up Y on the 5 and the Z on the 5. And that's just putting that pivot point on the edge. And then we need to rotate this on the X -90. Voila. And then now this is going to be called wall 01. And for this, we're going to do this one a little bit differently. For this one, well, we're using the same material really. So what, well, no, we got a different material for that. Yeah, so for this one, what I'm going to do is just drag the texture onto it. Now you can see it's using the default material, but let's drag this texture to it. Bam. Now what it did, it created a materials folder. So I could drag this material in there, and voila, all our materials are in there. See, let's duplicate this. And for our ceiling, we'll put this up at 10 and -5. And then we're going to rotate this 180 degrees. Now planes are one-sided, so oh, no, this should be 5. I got something backwards. We'll just reset that, put this to 180. And then we can move it up. You can see, oh, we just needed to do 10. There you go. Awesome. So now we'll call this ceiling 01. And we can click floor 01 and then shift click ceiling 01. And we'll duplicate this, Control D, or you can right click duplicate. We'll move this over. And we're moving this on the X. So all of these, we're actually moving over 10. And you can see I'm not right on. So I'll just make this X on 10. Bam. And everything's set up. Now what we want to do is take this floor and duplicate it. Let's see, Control D. I'm going to bring this down, and we'll actually call this wall left. And this one will make -5 and 0. And we'll set the rotation to -90. And also the Z 90. There we go. Now we've got this light here in our scene. This is our directional light. I'm going to move this out to the side. And we're getting this shadow here because of that. That's okay. Now this is actually a wall. So let's go into our textures here. We'll drag this wall onto there. So that way it's an actual wall. And then I'm going to go ahead and Control D. Name this wall right. And you can see that it should be at 15 on the X. There we go. Now we're going to take our light here. And we'll go ahead and turn that off so everything's kind of matching. There's no light. And we can go ahead and turn off our grid here. And then our camera, we can just kind of move over and then move it up so we get this cool view facing that way. And you'll notice because this plane is one-sided, it's a little bit off. So what we can do is we'll duplicate this and call this wall left, maybe number 2. And we really want this to just be off a little bit, and we need to rotate it on the Z. If we do -90, it'll actually flip it around. And we don't want it to be glitching right on top of the other one, so we could actually put this at 4.9. So that way it's just a tiny bit off, or better yet, -5 is fine, and we'll select the other wall left. That's right. That's behind it. And we'll set this one at -5.1. So that way it's outside of the box. Our top area here, these are actually got ceiling textures. So what we can do is just take our wall and we'll duplicate that and we'll call that the ceiling. And maybe what we should do, actually, I'm gonna move these out of the folder. So just for organizational purposes, so now that we got these organized and named, we'll drag our ceiling to the ceiling, the top two with ceiling. And we'll go ahead and select all of these and just move these out of the folder just so we have them all together right here, because they're going to look a little bit different once we start assigning all of the other textures. Now this material, we have a specific rendering mode. Now most of the time you're going to see opaque, and that's just going to be for something that's kind of solid color. We have cutout. This would be like if you have grass or you have something that is transparent around a certain area. We're going to use that for the window so that the areas around the frame are cut out. You have fade, and then you also have transparent. And those are a little bit different. But nonetheless, you're going to see the most common two, opaque and cutout. So for right now, we'll just use opaque. Now, albedo, we already talked about, that is going to represent the colors that are on the surface of the object. I like to call it the color map. Sometimes it's called a diffuse map, right? Diffuse color, or sometimes it might be called base map, but same thing. Then we have the metallic and smoothness. You'll notice the smoothness doesn't have a map, but it's right underneath metallic. Metallic and smoothing work together to control the reflectivity and light response of the surface. So with the metallic, how much of a metal is it? So we'll grab our ceiling metal map and throw that on there. And the smoothness, we'll have a little bit of smoothness. You can see to make it real metal like when we turn that up, you can kind of see that on the texture here. It makes everything very, very shiny with that. We might turn that down just a hair. And then we have the normal map. A normal map is used to save on memory. Instead of modeling all kinds of small details, we can use a normal map to fake that look instead of using real geometry. And the light will react with it as if it was modeled. And so you'll see the normal maps always are this purple map here. It's always got this purplish color. And this one by default oftentimes will just be set as default, but there's a special texture type for normal map. Now we don't have to set that yet because you'll see in a second. When I drag that into the slot, it'll go, whoa, this is not marked as a normal map, but you're saying it is, you want to use it. We can just do fix now. And then when we click back on this, you can see it automatically changed the texture type for us. Now you can see our example here and everything. I mean, it's like, wow, what a difference. I mean, just look at that. You can see how the light on this is just all the little indents and everything the lighting is reacting to it. Okay, and we could see that in our scene if we had some lights. So we'll create a light and we'll do a point light. And in our scene view, we can just kind of zoom in here and move this. If we want for now, we could kind of just look at this like so. So you can see the light is really reacting. I mean, look at that. You really get that bump to it. And we get a little error with the real-time lighting. That is that it would have to calculate everything every frame when you're doing real-time lights. For right now, we could just set this to mixed. Oftentimes, I'm using mixed and baked for specific things, but we could just set it to mixed for right now. Boom, boom, boom. And we can duplicate this for a second light, and we'll put this on the floor, which we don't have everything set up on the floor and the walls yet. So looking at this ceiling one, let's see, let's move this light this way. So it kind of looks more like, there we go. Awesome. So click back on our material here. So now we also have a height map. Now a height map is going to make it look like it's pushing the geometry, and it's going to fake as if it works well with the normal map. Essentially, we're using this to give extra definition or more definition to the surfaces for rendering large bumps and protrusions. One key note for those who want to get really deep in the information is that height maps can be more performance expensive. But when we use them, we usually use them with the normal map. So it may not be necessary depending on how detailed you want your game to be, but we do have a little example one we'll throw in here, and we'll get a little bit more bump up here on the ceiling. Then we have this ambient occlusion map. The AO map is going to tell the computer, the model, what should receive high or low indirect lighting that may come from like ambient lighting or reflections. So that way, say like a crack or crevice or fold might look more realistic. And the map is usually a grayscale image where white is indicating what should receive full indirect lighting and black will indicate that it should receive no indirect lighting. So when we put that in there, essentially where we have these dark cracks, they're not going to light up without like a real direct light on them. So the indirect light, it'll keep those kind of nice and dark. That's looking really nice. And now we have our final one. If we want emission or emissive, we want to turn that on. And here we get the color for emission. So what color do we want to emit? Well, we don't want the whole thing to emit a color. We only want certain parts of it, this kind of fake light. And so we do have an emissive map here. So black represents that there's none of those areas are emitting light essentially, but white saying that we're emitting some kind of light. Now, an emissive map, you can also have colored emissive maps where you could have a color here, but this map can be black and white. And then in Unity, we can specify the color right here. So currently it's white, but I could change this to say a lighter blue color. There we go. Maybe something like that. And so now we get that really nice area. And you can see with all these maps, when we move this light, we even get this nice reflection, this white reflection over it, making it look like it's really popping. So I'm going to turn this light down. We'll do like maybe 1. Kind of put this underneath it here. So it's kind of emitting from there. There you go. Cool. And we'll also select our other point light and also turn the intensity. So that's essentially how bright the light is. We'll turn that intensity down to 1 as well. Look back at our ceiling map. So for our ceiling map, we pretty much got everything on there. One key note, you'll see the tiling. You got to be careful. There's tiling for the regular maps that we did, the main maps, and then you can have secondary maps where you can have tiling on here as well. But for the regular maps, you'll notice that the tiling is a 1 by 1. So if I just select my floor here, you can see this is a 1 by 1 here. If I change, say, one of these to 0, I'll get this smeared look because it's got the pixels for just one area that are smeared across it because it's not tiling properly. Right, and if I do 0, 0, it'll just be totally nothing. So, but you can see, depending on which one is a 1, it smears it that way. So, tiling needs to be 1 by 1 so you don't get that smear across. Otherwise, you would need to fix the tiling. But that can be useful if this plane was actually a 1 by 2. Then I could have the texture tile as a 2 by 1 or a 1 by 2 so that it would go across that all the way. Versus right now I have 2 planes, right? But hey, so we got that in. Let's go ahead and take a look at our floor. and we'll go ahead and assign those same mats to that as well. Could also decrease the range of this. We're going to create these render windows for fun. So I'll bring this forward in the -Z. And let's go ahead and create another material, just so I don't want it to put it in a folder again. So we'll do the material. And there we go. Now, to put the image on there, if we click on our window frame, right, texture type, this is a default texture for a 3D game. 2D shape, and our alpha source. We don't actually have an alpha on this image, although we could save an alpha, but the actual windows were actually see-through because this is a PNG file. So we could actually just click alpha as transparency. So it'll use the transparency in the image. And we'll click apply, or you'll click off, it'll tell you. And then there it goes. Looky there. Now you can see the checkerboard pattern just like you would in Photoshop. We could select our window here. And what we're going to do is, we could go ahead and just drag this window frame in there. You'll see it's on the object. But now we don't see through the windows, right? You can see by the material. That's because Opaque doesn't support that. But we can change it to CutOut, just like we would if we were doing grass, right? And there we go. Now I may have some additional textures you could throw on the map window if you wanted to as well, to detail that out. We'll have that in there. That is looking nice. I like it.